Today, after a very public bust up and then a meeting at the Vatican, how Ukraine and the US made a deal. Donald Trump likes to compare the world to a game of poker. And he told Volodymyr Zelenskyy very publicly in the Oval Office that the Ukrainian president had no cards.
Let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
That Zelenskyy needed to shut up and put up with a deal to give the US access to potentially billions of dollars in mineral wealth under the Ukrainian ground. But when that minerals deal was finally signed last week...
The US says it's ready to sign a much-anticipated resources deal with Ukraine.
Actually, it wasn't too bad for Ukraine.
The deal is said to provide for a 50-50 joint economic fund between Kyiv and Washington.
Nothing is ever guaranteed with Trump, but in Kyiv, Zelensky's calling it a win, and so is the president in Washington. So how did Zelenskyy do it? What does it mean for the war? And what will other countries be learning about the dilemma they're facing too? From The Guardian, I'm Michael Safi. Today in Focus, how do you make a deal with Donald Trump? Andrew Roth, you're The Guardian's global affairs correspondent based in Washington, D.C. You're the man trying to make sense of a lot of the madness that we see out of the White House over the past few months. Last week, we learned that the US was signing a minerals deal with Ukraine. How much of a surprise was that announcement to you?
Yeah, I think, the minerals deal was something that wasn't a surprise in and of itself. We knew that it was coming down the pipeline and that it had been under negotiation for a long time. But I do think that it was a surprise for many people that they managed to actually push it across the line. And there's one real reason for that, and that's Donald Trump. Every week, it feels like we get a new position from Donald Trump. Sometimes we get multiple new positions from Donald Trump in a single morning. Nobody really believed, I think, that was going to happen until the two names were on the dotted line. So it really was in question up until the very last moment.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that despite the kind of chaos happening at the top of the administration, clearly under the surface, people were meeting, they were pushing this deal towards the signing table. What is it that has actually been agreed? Top line, what is this minerals deal?
The agreement behind the minerals deal is that the two sides, US and Ukraine, have agreed to a 50% split of the revenues, the money coming in from the future sale of basically everything that's under the soil in Ukraine. We're talking about, natural gas, oil possibly, but more importantly, we're talking about critical earth minerals. These include a couple of things: lithium, graphite, titanium. These are rare, important, critical minerals that are used in all kinds of industries around the world. And the other ones are called rare earth minerals. These are lesser known, but they're also key for the modern electronics industries and for a lot of other modern industries as well. So these are minerals that are critical for basically all of the kind of new sorts of manufacturing that are going to dominate the world for decades to come.
In a word, and we will unpack this further, was this a good deal, bad deal? It's complicated.
I guess with Ukraine and with the US, it's always kind of complicated. But I think that this was the best deal that Ukraine could get. And I think that given where we were, a couple of months ago, I think that this is a very good deal for Ukraine kind of going forward. What this deal is saying is that the US is going to have a kind of investment interest in Ukraine in the future. Whether or not that's going to be realized isn't really clear at the moment. But what's most important is that it does feel like there's a little bit more support for Ukraine in the US right now. I can feel the kind of difference in the ways that the Trump administration is speaking about Ukraine compared to a couple of months ago. And I think that's the key. What this really does for Ukraine is it secures at least some kind of support from the US politically in the near term. And given the state of the war, given the state of the negotiations over a possible ceasefire, it's really quite important right now. In the longer term, this is Ukraine giving up a significant amount of mineral wealth for the future. some people have compared it, to a kind of neo-colonialism or a kind of attempt to make Ukraine sell away the country. And this is definitely a situation where Ukraine was kind of forced to terms with this deal. There wasn't much that the country could do in terms of negotiating power. But given the situation, given the amount of reliance on the US, and given who's sitting in the White House right now, this is probably